On a cold winter morning, the woodsman trudged through the snow-covered forest, his boots crunching against the frozen earth. The forest was eerily quiet, save for the distant sound of a bird chirping. The trees were heavy with snow, their branches bowing under the weight, creating a canopy of white. He had lived in these woods for many years, all alone. There was no wife, no children, no family. He had once hoped for companionship, but time had worn him down. Now the forest was his only home, and the trees his only friends. Each day was the same: cutting wood, gathering firewood, preparing for the long winters. He spent his time in solitude, trying not to think of the emptiness that came with it. He had learned to live with it, but that didn't mean the loneliness didn't ache inside of him. As he walked through the snow, the wind biting at his face, he felt a strange emptiness, as if something was missing. He couldn't put his finger on it, but it was there. He had never felt it so strongly before. As he made his way deeper into the forest, he felt as though the trees were closing in on him, like he was vanishing into the vastness of the wilderness. He wondered if he would ever find what was missing, or if he would spend the rest of his days in this quiet despair. Little did he know, today would be different. His life was about to change forever. The woodsman had just finished cutting a large log when a strange sound caught his attention. At first, it was barely noticeable, just a soft rustling in the distance. But the sound grew louder and more frantic. Something was wrong. He paused, listening carefully. It was a cry, a sound of pain. He followed the sound, moving cautiously through the thick snow. As he rounded a bend, he saw it, a wolf lying in the snow, blood staining the white ground around it. Its chest rose and fell with shallow breaths, and it seemed too weak to move. The woodsman's heart skipped a beat. A wolf. He had always feared them. They were predators, wild and dangerous. But as he looked into the wolf's eyes, something in its gaze stopped him. It wasn't wild anger or fear. It was desperation. The wolf wasn't looking at him like a threat. It was looking at him like it needed help. The woodsman's fear melted away, replaced by something else, a sense of responsibility. He knew he couldn't leave the wolf to die in the cold. The decision was made in an instant. Carefully, he approached the animal, his hands shaking. The wolf didn't try to escape. It only watched him. Its breathing labored. With great effort, the woodsman lifted the wolf into his arms, cradling its heavy body. He couldn't understand why he was doing this, why he was risking his safety for a creature that could easily turn on him. But in that moment, it didn't matter. All that mattered was getting the wolf to safety. The woodsman carried the injured wolf through the snow, each step heavier than the last. The forest was quiet, the only sounds the crunch of his boots and the occasional rustle of the wind through the trees. The snowstorm was beginning to pick up again, making it harder to see, but he pressed on. The wolf was surprisingly calm in his arms, though its body was cold and stiff. As they reached the cabin, the woodsman hurried inside, his breath coming in heavy gasps from the effort. He quickly set the wolf down near the fire, adding more wood to the stove to warm the room. The crackling flames filled the cabin with warmth, a welcome contrast to the biting cold outside. For a long time, the woodsman didn't move. He simply sat there, staring at the wolf, wondering what to do next. The animal's fur was matted with blood, its body trembling from the cold. He knew the wounds would need to be cleaned, but for now he just watched. There was a strange comfort in the stillness of the moment. The loneliness he had felt earlier seemed to dissipate, replaced by the presence of this wounded creature. Days passed, and the woodsman devoted himself to caring for the wolf. He cleaned its wounds, fed it, and kept it warm by the fire. At first, the wolf was distant, unsure of him, but over time, it began to trust him. Every day it grew stronger, its wounds healing little by little. The woodsman was amazed at how quickly the animal recovered. It seemed as though it was determined to get better, as if it knew it had a purpose. The wolf's recovery was slow but steady. Each morning, it became a little more active, its movements less stiff. The woodsman could see the change in its eyes as well. At first, the wolf had been full of fear and mistrust, but now when their eyes met, there was a flicker of something else. Trust, perhaps. One morning, the wolf stood up on its own, its body still weak but no longer shaking. It walked over to the woodsman, its steps slow but steady. The woodsman looked down at it, And for the first time, he realized that the wolf was no longer just an injured animal. It was a companion. It had become something more, a friend. One evening, as the sun began to set and the forest grew darker, the woodsman heard a noise outside the cabin. At first, he thought it was the wind, but then he heard it again, a deep, guttural growl. His heart raced as he stood up, moving toward the door. There was no mistaking it now. A bear was nearby. The wolf, who had been resting by the fire, immediately stood up. Its ears perked, and it growled low in its throat. The woodsman's breath caught in his throat. He knew this could end badly. Bears were dangerous, especially in winter when food was scarce. Without a moment's hesitation, the wolf moved in front of him, its body tense and its teeth bared. It was ready to defend him, to protect him from whatever threat was out there. The woodsman froze, unsure of what to do. The bear lumbered closer, its massive body casting a shadow in the growing darkness. But the wolf stood its ground, refusing to back down. It growled again, louder this time, and the bear paused, sensing the danger. After a few tense moments, the bear turned and disappeared into the forest, leaving the woodsman and the wolf alone in the quiet night. The following day, the woodsman went out to gather wood. As he walked through the forest, he noticed something unusual, a bone left for him by the wolf. It was a sign of the animal's loyalty. The woodsman bent down to pick it up, a deep sense of gratitude filling his chest. The wolf was no longer just an animal to him. It had become his protector, his companion, and his friend. Over time, the woodsman realized that this creature, once a wild predator, had become an integral part of his life. Together they hunted, explored the forest, and shared the quiet moments of their days. The bond between them grew stronger with each passing day, and the woodsman knew he would never be alone again. As the months passed, the woodsman began to feel a deeper connection to the forest. It was no longer just a place of isolation and loneliness. With the wolf by his side, the forest became a home. The once quiet nights were filled with the warmth of companionship, and every morning was greeted with the presence of a friend. The bond between man and wolf had transcended mere survival. They had become part of each other's lives, inseparable. The woodsman realized that his life had been incomplete before the wolf arrived. Together, they had found a balance, a connection between man and nature, a harmony that had eluded him for so long. One morning, the wolf left the cabin, as it always did, but this time something had changed. It didn't leave for long. Every morning it returned, and together they faced the challenges of the world. They were stronger together, man and beast, companions in a world that could be harsh and unforgiving. Their friendship had changed them both. No longer was the woodsman a solitary figure, lost in the vast forest. He had found his place, his purpose, and his companion. The wolf had given him a gift he hadn't even known he needed, the gift of connection. And so, they continued their journey together, each day bringing new challenges, new adventures, and new moments of peace. The bond they shared would carry them through the rest of their lives together in the quiet wilderness.